There is a specific kind of woman who can afford the car for 2 years and still drives the old one with the check engine light taped over with a sticky note that says it's fine. Not because she does not have the money. She has the money. She has had the money for a while now. She just could not give herself permission to spend it on something that was not, technically, an emergency. This is not a story about a car. Let us get that out of the way immediately, because if you came here expecting a plot with characters and a dramatic reveal, I am going to disappoint you, and then, hopefully, undisappoint you. What you are actually about to sit through is a breakdown of one of the strangest psychological loops a woman can get stuck in. The loop where spending money on comfort feels more irresponsible than spending money on survival, even when both cost exactly the same. So, here is the real question underneath the headline. Why does it take some women years, sometimes decades, to buy something they can clearly afford, while other people buy the same thing on a whim without blinking? It is not income. It is not math. It is something else entirely, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Most people assume the hesitation is financial caution. Smart, responsible, disciplined. The kind of woman who reads spreadsheets for fun. And sure, that plays a small part. But the bigger, uglier truth is this. For a lot of women, spending on themselves has been quietly filed under selfish since childhood, while spending on everyone else got filed under responsible. Same bank account. Two completely different emotional tax rates. That is the hidden truth nobody puts on a finance channel, because it does not sound like finance. It sounds like therapy. But stick with me, because this is where the actual money conversation begins. Let us talk about the car specifically for a second, because a car is the perfect case study for this. It is not jewelry, so nobody can call it vanity. It is not a vacation, so nobody can call it indulgent. A car is functional. It gets you to work, to the grocery store, to your kids' school pickup, to your own life. And yet, somehow, even something this practical gets held hostage by guilt. A woman will keep the 15-year-old sedan with the suspicious noise because it still runs. She will keep driving something that embarrasses her a little every single day because upgrading feels like announcing something. Announcing what exactly? That she is doing well? That she takes up space? That she matters enough to be comfortable? Here is where it gets interesting, because this is not really about the car at all. It is about what buying the car represents. And what it represents for a lot of women is permission. Permission to stop operating from scarcity even after the scarcity is gone. Let us slow down here, because this deserves more attention than a passing sentence. There is a version of financial behavior that has nothing to do with your actual bank balance and everything to do with an old internal setting that never got updated. Think of it like software running an outdated operating system. The income changed. The savings changed. The credit score changed. But the internal programming that decides what she is allowed to spend on never got the update. This is why you will meet women with healthy savings accounts who still hesitate at the checkout line for a $40 candle, but will not blink dropping $400 on somebody else's baby shower gift. The math is not the problem. The permission structure is the problem. Now here is a subscribe reminder, because if this kind of pattern-breaking observation is doing something for you right now, you are exactly the audience this channel was built for. Hit subscribe, because every video here digs into the quiet financial behaviors nobody names out loud, and there is a lot more where this came from. Back to the car, and back to the permission problem, because there is a twist coming that changes the entire conversation. You would think the moment she finally buys the car, the story ends. Happy ending, roll credits, she is comfortable now. But that is not what happens. What actually happens, in almost every version of the story, is far more uncomfortable than the years of hesitation that came before it. The moment she signs the paperwork, something unexpected shows up. Not relief. Guilt. A very specific, very sneaky kind of guilt that whispers, "You did not need this," even while she is holding the keys. This is the part nobody warns you about. The hardest part of upgrading your life is not affording the upgrade. It is surviving the discomfort of having it. Because here is what nobody tells you about scarcity thinking. It does not just control what you spend. It controls how you feel after you spend it. A woman can save for 3 years, do all the responsible planning, buy well within her means, and still lie awake the first week second-guessing the decision, not because the numbers do not add up, but because comfort was never part of her identity before this. Her identity was built around being the one who makes do, who stretches things, who does not need much. Buying the car does not just change her transportation. It quietly threatens the identity she built her entire self-image around. This is the twist. This is the part that turns a simple purchase into a full identity renovation. The car was never actually the challenge. Getting comfortable being someone who has nice things without apologizing for it, that is the actual challenge, and it is a much bigger one. Let us sit with that for a second, because this is where the story stops being about money entirely and starts being about self-worth. There is a strange little ritual that plays out in the days right after a purchase like this, and if you have ever gone through it, you will recognize it instantly. She keeps the old car parked outside for an extra week, even though it has already been replaced, as if getting rid of it too quickly would somehow be disrespectful, or careless, or a little too eager. There is something almost superstitious about it, like holding on to the evidence of the old identity a little longer, just in case the new one does not stick. Just in case someone asks why she needed an upgrade at all, and she needs the old car sitting there as a kind of alibi. See, I was practical. I did not rush into this. Nobody teaches you that upgrading your life comes with its own strange grief period. Not grief for the object itself. Nobody is mourning a car with a check engine light. Grief for the identity that object represented. Being the woman who makes do is uncomfortable, sure, but it was also familiar, and familiar has its own gravitational pull even when it is unpleasant. Comfort, ironically, can feel like the more frightening option, simply because it is unfamiliar territory. Think about how many women were raised, directly or indirectly, to believe that needing less made them good, and wanting more made them greedy. Somewhere along the way, restraint got confused with virtue. A woman who denies herself gets quietly praised. She is so responsible. She never spoils herself. She always puts everyone else first. These sound like compliments. They are actually training. They are teaching a woman that her value goes up the smaller she keeps her own needs. So when she finally buys the car, she is not just buying a vehicle. She is breaking a rule she did not even know she agreed to. And this is exactly why the aftereffects are so strange. You would expect pride. Instead, a lot of women report something closer to a mild identity crisis. Small things start shifting. She catches herself over-explaining the purchase to people who did not even ask. It was time. The old one was falling apart. I got a good deal. Justifying a decision she is completely entitled to make, as if spending her own money requires a legal defense. Here is something worth noticing. Watch what she does in the weeks after. Some women, once that first guilt wave passes, start making other decisions differently too. Not reckless decisions. Aligned ones. She starts saying no to plans she does not want to attend. She starts asking for the raise she has been quietly earning for 2 years. She stops finishing other people's leftover tasks just to keep the peace. The car was the domino. The identity shift is the real event. This is the part of the story that rarely gets mentioned when people talk about women and money, and it deserves way more attention than it gets. Financial growth is never just about the number in the account. It is about whether the woman holding that number believes she is allowed to enjoy it. You can hand 2 women the exact same salary, the exact same savings, the exact same opportunity, and they will build 2 completely different lives, because one of them believes comfort is earned only through suffering first, and the other one believes comfort is simply the natural result of doing well. Same math. 2 entirely different emotional operating systems. Before we get to that, let's talk about the math for a second, because somebody watching this is already thinking, but what if she genuinely could not afford it before? Fair point. Let us address it honestly instead of pretending every hesitation is psychological. There is a real, practical version of this where the numbers truly do not work yet, and delaying a purchase is simply smart. Nobody is arguing against budgeting. Nobody is arguing against patience. The distinction here is narrower than that, and it matters. It is the difference between a woman who checks her numbers, sees she can comfortably afford the upgrade, and still delays it for another 18 months out of guilt, versus a woman who genuinely cannot swing the payment yet and is being responsible by waiting. Those 2 women look identical from the outside. Same old car in the driveway. Same hesitation on the surface. Completely different internal reasons underneath it. The pattern we are discussing only applies to the first woman. The one who ran the numbers, confirmed she was fine, and still could not bring herself to sign the paperwork without a small internal war first. That gap between "I can afford this" and "I feel entitled to this" is the actual subject of this documentary, and it shows up far more often than people admit, because admitting it out loud feels a little embarrassing. It feels irrational to say, "I had the money. I just did not feel like I deserved to spend it." Nobody wants to say that sentence at a dinner table. But a large number of women watching this right now have lived some version of it, whether it was a car, a haircut, a gym membership, or something as small as ordering the meal she actually wanted instead of the cheapest thing on the menu, out of some quiet, unspoken fear of taking up too much. Let us talk about status for a moment, because it is impossible to talk about a big visible purchase like a car without addressing it directly, and I am not going to dance around it. There is a very real, very human instinct to wonder what other people will think. Will people assume she is showing off? Will people think she is doing better than she actually is? Will people start expecting more from her now? This fear is so common it has quietly stopped women from making completely reasonable upgrades for years. Not because they cannot afford it, because visibility feels risky. Here is the uncomfortable truth about that fear. Other people are rarely thinking about your car as much as you think they are. They notice it for about 4 seconds and then go back to worrying about their own lives, their own bills, their own choices. The audience she is performing restraint for barely exists. The only person keeping score the whole time was her. That reframe alone changes everything. Once a woman realizes the imaginary audience judging her spending was mostly just her own inner critic wearing a disguise, the guilt starts losing its grip a lot faster. Now, something else worth mentioning, because this documentary is not interested in giving you a tidy bow at the end. Buying the car does not fix everything. It is not a magic reset button. What it does is expose something. It reveals exactly how much of her life has been shaped by rules she never consciously agreed to. Rules about deserving things. Rules about being too much. Rules about staying small so nobody feels threatened by her doing well. Once that gets exposed, she cannot go back to pretending she does not see it. That is the real transformation. Not the car. The awareness. This is where the deeper insight comes in, the one that connects everything we have talked about so far. Money was never actually the obstacle in this story. Permission was. And permission is not something anyone else can give her. Not a partner, not a parent, not society loosening its opinions about ambitious women. Permission is something she has to grant herself, over and over, until it stops feeling like rebellion and starts feeling like normal life. Every woman who has ever delayed something she could clearly afford, out of guilt, out of fear of being judged, out of some invisible rulebook she inherited without ever agreeing to it, is fighting the exact same quiet battle. The car is just today's version of it. Tomorrow it might be the vacation she's been postponing, the business she has been scared to start, the raise she has been too polite to ask for, the relationship she has been too afraid to walk away from because leaving felt like too much disruption. The pattern is always the same. Deserve it first. Enjoy it never. Rinse and repeat until something finally breaks the loop. So here is the real ending to the story, and it is not going to be the motivational wrap-up you expect. The lesson is not treat yourself, and it is not spend more. That is shallow advice dressed up as empowerment. The actual lesson is this. Notice where you have been performing restraint that nobody asked you to perform. Notice which rules you are still obeying long after the reason for them disappeared. Notice how much of your financial behavior is really just an old identity trying to keep you small because small used to feel safe. Because here is the thing about comfort. It does not corrupt you. It does not make you lazy, or greedy, or ungrateful. It simply removes the excuse. Once she is not spending all her energy surviving, she has to figure out what she actually wants, who she actually is, and what she is actually capable of when fear is not steering the wheel anymore. That is the real thing that changed the day she finally bought the car. Not the model, not the color, not the monthly payment. What changed was the quiet, permanent realization that she was allowed to want things and have them at the same time, without earning it through years of unnecessary suffering first. There is one more layer to this worth sitting with before we close, And it has to do with comparison, because comparison is usually lurking somewhere underneath all of this, even when nobody names it directly. A lot of the guilt around spending does not come from within a vacuum. It gets fed, quietly, by watching other people. Watching a woman post a photo online, and instantly running the math on what she must earn, what she must have sacrificed, whether she deserves it more or less than you do. That comparison engine runs constantly in the background, uninvited, and it rarely produces anything useful. It just produces more scorekeeping. Here is what almost nobody says about that scorekeeping. It is not really about the other woman at all. It is a mirror. Whatever judgment shows up first, whether it is admiration, resentment, suspicion, or envy, it is usually revealing exactly where your own permission is stuck, not anything meaningful about her choices. A woman who has fully made peace with her own spending rarely spends energy auditing someone else's. The ones still auditing are usually the ones still negotiating with themselves. And once a woman learns that lesson in one area of her life, she rarely keeps it contained to just one area. It leaks into everything, into how she negotiates, into how she rests, into how she spends a random Wednesday afternoon without needing to justify it to anyone, into how she shows up in rooms she used to shrink herself in. The car was never the point. It was just the first thing brave enough to prove it.